While Quebec's real estate market has been surprisingly resilient through 2024 and 2025, certain warning signs are flashing red for specific cities across the province. We've analyzed economic indicators, demographic trends, and industry patterns to identify the 10 Quebec cities that could face serious housing market corrections by 2026. But here's what makes this list absolutely crucial. Don't miss number 5, because it involves a city that everyone thinks is bulletproof, and number 2 will completely change how you view Quebec's economic future. Let's jump right in. Number 10. Sept-Îles. The iron ore capital is sitting on a powder keg, and most people don't even realize it. Sept-Îles has built its entire economy around mining, specifically iron ore extraction and shipping. But here's the disturbing reality. Global iron ore prices are becoming increasingly volatile, and China's economic slowdown is directly impacting demand. The city's median home price has been artificially inflated by mining boom cycles, creating a dangerous bubble. Think about this. What happens to a one-industry town when that industry faces headwinds? We're already seeing early warning signs with mining companies scaling back operations and postponing expansions. The unemployment rate in resource-dependent regions has been creeping upward, and Sept-Îles is particularly vulnerable because it lacks economic diversification. For homeowners in Sept-Îles, this should be terrifying. Your property value is essentially tied to commodity prices happening thousands of miles away in Chinese steel mills. When those mills slow down, your home value could plummet overnight. The harsh reality is that remote resource towns are always the first to feel economic pain and the last to recover. But Sept-Îles isn't alone in facing resource-dependent challenges, which brings us to our next city facing even more severe structural problems. Number 9. Shawinigan. The city that's been fighting decline for decades might finally lose the battle completely. Shawinigan was once an industrial powerhouse, but those glory days are long gone. What makes this situation particularly dire is the accelerating population decline. Young people are leaving faster than ever, and the aging population can't sustain the housing demand needed to maintain property values. Here's something that should alarm every property owner in Shawinigan. The city has one of the highest vacancy rates in Quebec, yet home prices haven't adjusted to reflect this reality. This disconnect between supply and demand is creating an unsustainable situation. When reality finally catches up, the correction will be swift and brutal. The manufacturing sector, which was supposed to revitalize the city, has been struggling with competition from overseas and automation. Major employers have been quietly reducing their workforce, and the ripple effects are spreading throughout the local economy. Retail businesses are closing. Municipal tax revenues are declining, and infrastructure is aging without adequate funding for maintenance. For investors or homeowners, Shawinigan represents a perfect storm of demographic decline, economic stagnation, and oversupply. The question isn't whether prices will fall, but how far and how fast. This demographic challenge is becoming a pattern across Quebec, but our next city faces additional pressures that make it particularly vulnerable. Number 8. Alma. The aluminum city is about to discover that even stable industries can't save overvalued markets. Alma has always prided itself on having Rio Tinto's aluminum smelter as an economic anchor, but this sense of security might be dangerously misplaced. The global aluminum market is facing unprecedented challenges from electric vehicle battery technology, changes, and new recycling processes that reduce demand for primary aluminum production. Here's what's really happening behind the scenes. Energy costs in Quebec are rising, and aluminum smelting is incredibly energy-intensive. The provincial government's push toward renewable energy comes with higher costs that directly impact aluminum production economics. Meanwhile, competitors in the Middle East and Asia are operating with much lower energy costs. The housing market in Alma has been buoyed by well-paying smelter jobs, but those jobs are becoming less secure than people realize. Automation is reducing workforce needs, and global competition is intensifying pressure on operations. When a city's economic foundation starts showing cracks, real estate values typically follow with a 6 to 12-month delay. What makes Alma particularly vulnerable is its geographic isolation. Unlike cities near major urban centers, Alma doesn't have alternative employment opportunities within commuting distance. When the primary employer faces challenges, there's nowhere else for workers to turn, creating a domino effect throughout the local housing market. The signs are already there for those paying attention, but they're about to become impossible to ignore. Number 7. Thetford Mines. The asbestos legacy continues to haunt this city in ways that threaten its entire real estate market. Thetford Mines carries the permanent burden of its asbestos mining history, and this liability is finally catching up with property values. Environmental remediation costs are astronomical, and potential health concerns continue to stigmatize the entire region. This isn't just about past contamination, it's about future liability and perception. Here's the harsh reality that real estate agents won't tell you. Insurance companies are becoming increasingly wary of properties in former asbestos regions. Some insurers are already raising premiums or refusing coverage entirely. This creates a cascading effect where buyers can't get financing, which directly impacts property values. The city has tried to diversify its economy, but success has been limited. The manufacturing sector remains small and vulnerable to economic downturns. Tourism potential is hampered by the asbestos legacy, and attracting new businesses remains challenging due to perception issues. For current homeowners, this creates a uniquely difficult situation. Even if the local economy improves, the asbestos stigma will continue to affect property values for decades. Potential buyers from outside the region often refuse to consider properties in Thetford Mines, severely limiting the resale market. The environmental legacy isn't going away, and neither are its effects on real estate values. This permanent disadvantage makes Thetford Mines particularly vulnerable to market corrections. But environmental concerns aren't the only factor threatening Quebec cities. Economic structural changes are creating even bigger problems in our next location. Number 6. Dolbeau-Mistassini. The forestry crisis is about to devastate this community's housing market like a clear-cut forest. Dolbeau-Mistassini's economy revolves around forestry and wood products, but this industry is facing existential threats that most residents don't fully understand. U.S. tariffs on Canadian lumber have already forced major producers like Groupe Remabec to lay off over 1,000 workers across Quebec. This isn't a temporary setback. It's a structural shift that threatens the entire forestry-dependent economy. Here's what makes this situation particularly dangerous. The forestry industry is simultaneously dealing with trade wars, environmental regulations, and technological disruption. Mill closures are accelerating, and many operations that shut down temporarily never reopen. When a mill closes in a forestry town, it's like removing the heart from the community. This creates a vicious cycle where declining population reduces housing demand, just as economic uncertainty makes properties harder to sell. What should terrify homeowners is the speed at which forestry towns can collapse. Unlike gradual economic transitions, mill closures create immediate unemployment that ripples through the entire community. Retail businesses close, municipal revenues decline, and property values can drop 30 to 40% within months. The signs are already visible for those willing to look, but the worst is yet to come. Number 5. Trois-Rivières. Here's the shocker that everyone needs to pay attention to. The city that's supposed to be diversified and stable is actually sitting on a real estate time bomb that's about to explode. Trois-Rivières has always marketed itself as economically diverse, but this diversity is actually a collection of vulnerable industries rather than stable foundations. The city's manufacturing sector is under constant pressure from automation and international competition. The forestry components we discussed are present here too. But here's the real kicker that makes this city uniquely dangerous. It's caught in a demographic squeeze that most people haven't recognized. The city is too small to compete with Montreal for young professionals, too far from Quebec City for convenient commuting, and too dependent on declining industries to maintain its current economic base. This creates a perfect storm where property values have been maintained by older homeowners who can't easily relocate, while younger buyers increasingly look elsewhere. Here's the data that should alarm everyone. Trois-Rivières has been experiencing negative net migration among people aged 25 to 40, which are the prime home buying years. Meanwhile, the aging population is creating an oversupply of larger homes just as demand for those properties is declining. This mismatch is unsustainable and will eventually force a major market correction. The university provides some stability, but it's not enough to offset the broader economic challenges. Student housing needs are different from family housing, and the presence of UQTR doesn't create the high-paying jobs needed to support current property values. What makes Trois-Rivières particularly dangerous for investors is that it appears stable on the surface while underlying fundamentals are deteriorating. When the correction comes, it will surprise people who thought they were making safe investments. But if you think that's concerning, wait until you hear about the mining-dependent communities facing even more severe challenges. Number 4. Rouyn-Noranda. The mining capital of Quebec is about to learn that boom cycles always end, and this one might be the last. Rouyn-Noranda has built its entire identity around mining, particularly copper and gold extraction. But here's what mining companies aren't telling residents. Ore grades are declining, extraction costs are rising, and global competition is intensifying. The easy-to-reach deposits have been mined out, and accessing remaining resources requires increasingly expensive and environmentally controversial methods. The housing market has been supported by mining wages that are significantly above provincial averages, but those wages are under pressure from automation and operational efficiency demands. Mining companies are reducing workforce while maintaining production levels, which means fewer high-paying jobs to support local property values. Here's the terrifying reality for homeowners. Mining towns are uniquely vulnerable to sudden economic collapse. Unlike diversified economies that decline gradually, mining-dependent communities can face immediate devastation when operations become uneconomical. Property values in mining towns can drop 50 to 60% within a single year when major operations close. For property investors, Rouyn-Noranda represents maximum risk with declining reward potential. The city lacks economic alternatives, geographic advantages, or demographic trends that could support property values if mining activities decline. The warning signs are flashing red, but many residents are too invested emotionally and financially to recognize the danger. Number 3. Baie-Comeau. The hydroelectric advantage is becoming a hydroelectric trap, and most people don't even realize it. Baie-Comeau built its modern economy around cheap hydroelectric power, attracting energy-intensive industries, but this advantage is evaporating in real time. Global energy markets are changing rapidly, renewable energy is becoming cheaper everywhere, and Quebec's historical power advantage is diminishing. The aluminum industry, which has been a major employer, is facing the same global pressures we discussed with Alma, but Baie-Comeau is even more vulnerable due to its smaller size and greater dependence on a single facility. When energy-intensive industries lose their competitive advantage, they don't gradually decline. They relocate to more cost-effective locations. Here's what should alarm every property owner. The city's geographic isolation means there are no alternative economic engines if the primary industries face challenges. Unlike southern Quebec cities that can pivot to services or technology, Baie-Comeau's location limits its economic options to resource extraction and processing. The demographic trends are equally concerning. Young people are leaving faster than they're being replaced, and the aging population requires more services while contributing less to the tax base. Municipal finances are becoming strained, which affects infrastructure maintenance and community services that support property values. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that Baie-Comeau's property values have been inflated by the lack of housing supply relative to well-paying industrial jobs. When those jobs become uncertain, the adjustment will be swift and severe because there's no underlying demand to support current price levels. The economic fundamentals are shifting beneath the surface, and the real estate market hasn't caught up to reality yet. Number 2. Val-d'Or. Here's the revelation that will change everything you think you know about Quebec's regional economy. Val-d'Or represents the perfect example of how resource dependency creates unsustainable real estate bubbles that are destined to burst. Val-d'Or has been the poster child for mining success in Quebec, but this success has created dangerous complacency about economic vulnerability. The city's prosperity depends entirely on gold mining and related services, making it extremely vulnerable to commodity price fluctuations and operational changes. Here's the shocking reality that mining companies don't want you to know. Most gold mines in the Val-d'Or region are approaching the end of their economic life cycles. New discoveries aren't replacing depleted reserves at the same rate, and accessing deeper deposits requires exponentially higher costs. The easy gold has been found and extracted. The housing market has been inflated by mining salaries that can be 2 to 3 times higher than provincial averages, but these jobs are becoming increasingly automated and consolidated. Modern mining operations require far fewer workers than traditional operations, and the trend toward remote-controlled and autonomous mining equipment is accelerating. What should terrify every homeowner and investor is that Val-d'Or lacks any significant economic alternatives. The city is too remote to attract manufacturing or services, too specialized to diversify easily, and too dependent on a single industry to survive major disruptions. When the mining sector faces challenges, there's literally nowhere else for the local economy to turn. The demographic data reveals a concerning trend. While older, established miners remain in Val-d'Or, younger workers are increasingly choosing to work temporary assignments while maintaining permanent residences in larger cities. This reduces local housing demand while maintaining the illusion of economic stability. Environmental regulations are becoming stricter, community opposition to mining activities is growing, and global competition from lower-cost jurisdictions is intensifying. Val-d'Or is fighting an economic battle on multiple fronts, and the residential real estate market is completely unprepared for the potential consequences. But even Val-d'Or's challenges pale in comparison to our #1 city, where multiple crisis factors are converging to create the perfect storm for real estate collapse. Number 1. Tuque. The convergence crisis, where forestry collapse, demographic decline, and geographic isolation create the perfect storm for real estate devastation. Tuque represents everything that can go wrong with regional Quebec real estate markets happening simultaneously. The forestry industry, which has been the economic backbone for over a century, is facing existential threats from U.S. tariffs, environmental regulations, and changing global demand patterns. But forestry isn't just declining, it's collapsing. Here's the catastrophic reality. Tuque's population has been declining for decades, and the trend is accelerating. Young families are leaving, businesses are closing, and municipal services are being reduced due to declining tax revenues. The city is caught in a death spiral where population decline reduces economic activity, which accelerates more population decline. The housing market fundamentals are absolutely terrifying. There's a massive oversupply of properties relative to demand, but prices haven't adjusted because current homeowners can't afford to sell at market-clearing prices. This creates an artificial price floor that's completely disconnected from economic reality. Geographic isolation makes everything worse. Tuque is too far from major urban centers to attract commuters, too small to develop independent economic clusters, and too specialized to adapt quickly to changing economic conditions. The city lacks the critical mass needed to support diverse economic activities. Here's what makes Tuque the most dangerous real estate market in Quebec. The problems are structural, permanent, and accelerating. Unlike cyclical economic challenges that eventually recover, Tuque faces fundamental changes that threaten the entire community's long-term viability. The forestry jobs aren't coming back, the young population isn't returning, and alternative economic opportunities don't exist. Property owners are essentially trapped in a declining market with no realistic exit strategy except to accept massive losses. Environmental factors make everything worse. Climate change is affecting forestry operations, flooding risks are increasing along the St. Maurice River, and infrastructure maintenance costs are rising while the tax base shrinks. Municipal finances are approaching crisis levels, which directly impacts property values and community services. For real estate investors, Tuque represents a cautionary tale about the dangers of investing in resource-dependent communities without economic alternatives. For current homeowners, the situation represents a potential financial catastrophe that most people aren't prepared to face. The warning signs have been visible for years, but most people have been too optimistic or too invested to recognize the severity of the situation. The real estate correction in Tuque won't be gradual. It will be swift, severe, and possibly permanent. From the mining vulnerabilities of Sept-Îles and Rouyn-Noranda to the forestry collapse affecting Dolbeau-Mistassini and Tuque, these 10 Quebec cities face unprecedented challenges that threaten to devastate their real estate markets by 2026. The combination of industry decline, demographic shifts, and economic isolation creates perfect storm conditions for property value crashes that could reach 30 to 50% in the most vulnerable markets. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that many homeowners and investors remain unaware of these underlying risks, creating markets where current prices don't reflect economic reality. What do you think about these predictions? Are you seeing warning signs in your own Quebec community? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and tell us which factors you think pose the greatest risks to regional real estate markets. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth real estate market insights. Click the bell icon to get notified when we release our next market analysis, because staying informed could save you from making costly real estate mistakes in these uncertain times.